Take a deep breath and hear a story about Liz, a woman who found her home and connections across the globe. Liz Morgan lived in a cozy cottage nestled at the edge of a small Connecticut town where maple trees lined the quiet streets and birds sang sweet melodies in the morning light. Her home was filled with books that transported her to faraway lands, each page containing worlds more expansive than her limited social circle. The warm glow of her reading lamp cast gentle shadows on the walls each evening, creating a cocoon of comfort that wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. Her fingers would trace the spines of her books, feeling the slight texture of each cover, finding solace in the stories that filled her quiet evenings with adventure and meaning. Her parents lived just down the road in the same house where she'd grown up, a charming Victorian with a wraparound porch where they would gather for Sunday dinners beneath the soft glow of string lights. The aroma of her mother's freshly baked bread would waft through the air, mingling with the scent of her father's herb garden that bordered the porch, creating a sensory symphony that defined home for Liz. These weekly gatherings were enough social interaction to satisfy her, the comfortable silence between conversations as nurturing as the conversations themselves, filled with the gentle clink of silverware and the soft laughter of shared memories. Liz worked from home as a translator, converting technical manuals into multiple languages, a job that suited her preference for solitude while still connecting her to the world beyond her windows. Her desk faced the garden, where she could watch butterflies dance from flower to flower, their delicate wings catching the sunlight as they moved in unhurried patterns across her view. A gentle tapping of her keyboard provided a soothing rhythm to her days, a productive melody that accompanied the natural sounds filtering through her partially open window. At 32, Liz had never felt the absence of a bustling social life as a void. Rather, she saw it as a choice that afforded her the luxury of deep thoughts and creative pursuits. She painted landscapes in her spare time, capturing the changing seasons on canvas with gentle brushstrokes that mirrored the unhurried pace of her life, each color blending into the next like the days flowing into weeks. Her paintings adorned the walls of her home, creating a gallery of moments that had caught her eye and captured her heart, a visual diary of her contented existence. Her small family unit provided all the companionship she needed her parents with their weekly dinners. Her younger brother, who called every few days from his apartment in New York, and her elderly cat, Fitzgerald, who purred contentedly on her lap as she read. The soft rumble of Fitzgerald's purr would vibrate against her legs, a living metronome that kept time with the peaceful passing of hours, his warm weight an anchor to the present moment. His golden eyes would sometimes meet hers with a slow blink, a silent communication of companionship that required no words, just mutual understanding and appreciation. Life had a comfortable rhythm Monday morning, calls with her editor, Wednesday deliveries of fresh produce from the local farm, Friday evenings spent stargazing from her porch. The predictable pattern of her days brought her a sense of security, each activity flowing into the next like a well-rehearsed dance, with no unexpected move to throw her off balance. The cool night air would caress her face as she identified constellations, a weekly ritual that connected her to the vastness of the universe while simultaneously grounding her in her small corner of the world. Sometimes she would walk to the local bakery, exchanging pleasant but brief conversations with the owner who knew her preference for sourdough and almond croissants. The rich aroma of freshly baked goods would envelop her as she entered, the bell above the door announcing her arrival with a cheerful jingle that seemed to welcome her back. The warmth from the ovens created a cozy atmosphere that invited lingering, though Liz usually took her purchases home to enjoy in the company of a good book and Fitzgerald's watchful presence. Liz found joy in the changing seasons, spring bringing new blossoms to her garden, summer offering warm evenings for reading outdoors, fall painting the world in amber and crimson, winter wrapping everything in a hushed blanket of snow. Each transition brought its own sensory delights. The sweet fragrance of blooming lilacs, the gentle warmth of sunshine on bare shoulders, the crisp sound of fallen leaves beneath her feet, the soft silence of snowfall in the early morning hours. These natural cycles provided variety enough for her, each season a new chapter in the ongoing story of her content and uncomplicated life. She maintained a few long-distance friendships through occasional letters and emails, connections that required little daily maintenance, but offered deep understanding when they did communicate. The arrival of a handwritten letter would bring a smile to her face, the familiar handwriting of an old friend bringing their voice into her quiet home, bridging the physical distance with words that carried memories and affection. She would save these letters in a wooden box, sometimes rereading them on rainy afternoons, finding comfort in these tangible reminders of connections that endured despite time and distance. Her dreams were modest to visit the Greek islands someday, to master watercolor techniques, to read all the classics she hadn't yet explored. These aspirations floated gently in her mind, unhurried and unpressured, waiting for the right moment to transform from thoughts into actions, each one a possibility rather than an obligation. In the meantime, she found fulfillment in small accomplishments, a perfectly translated passage, a satisfying ending to a novel, the blooming of a particularly challenging plant in her garden. Then came the letter that would disrupt her tranquil existence. Her parents announcing their decision to retire to Florida, where the warm sunshine would ease her father's arthritis. The paper trembled slightly in her hands as she read their gentle explanation, their excitement about the new chapter ahead of them, mingling with their awareness of what this change would mean for her. The familiar handwriting seemed to waver before her eyes, the words rearranging themselves into a future she hadn't anticipated, one without the Sunday dinners and impromptu visits that had anchored her weeks. Fitzgerald sensed her unease, pressing his warm body against her ankles as she stood in the kitchen, the letter still in her hand, her mind racing with the implications of this unexpected change. The afternoon light streamed through the window, catching dust motes that danced in the air, seemingly suspended in time just as Liz felt in that moment, caught between the comfortable past and an uncertain future. Her breath came a little faster, her heart beating a rhythm of anxiety she rarely experienced in her carefully curated life of calm and predictability. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of helping her parents pack, each box sealed representing another piece of her stability being wrapped away. The familiar objects of her childhood home, the grandfather clock in the hallway, her mother's collection of blue willow china, the patchwork quilt that had covered the living room, sofa, all disappeared into cardboard containers bound for a house she had never seen. The sounds of packing tape being pulled from rolls and cardboard being folded created a discordant soundtrack to this transition, so different from the peaceful ambient noises that usually filled her days. After her parents departed, Liz returned to her cottage, which suddenly seemed unnaturally quiet despite having always been a place of solitude. She moved through the familiar rooms, her footsteps echoing differently now that they carried the weight of her complete aloneness in the town. The evening light cast longer shadows than she remembered, stretching across her floor like fingers reaching for something just beyond grasp, a visual representation of the longing she felt for the comfortable pattern that had been disrupted. Fitzgerald provided companionship, but the absence of Sunday dinners left a void that seemed to expand with each passing week. She found herself lingering longer at the bakery, engaging the owner in conversations that extended beyond pleasantries, hungry for human connection in a way she had never experienced before. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla became associated with these new, tentative reaches toward friendship, the bakery becoming a sanctuary where she could practice the rusty art of casual conversation. One rainy Tuesday, while sheltering in the local bookstore, waiting for a sudden downpour to pass, Liz encountered a travel photography book that captured her attention with its vibrant images of marketplaces in Morocco, temples in Japan, and cafes in Paris. Her fingers traced the glossy photographs, feeling the smooth paper beneath her fingertips, a tactile connection to places that existed beyond the boundaries of her small town. The sound of rain against the shop windows created a soothing backdrop as she lost herself in pages that promised adventure and discovery. That night, unable to sleep, Liz researched flights to Portugal, a country whose language she had recently helped translate a guidebook for, feeling both terrified and exhilarated by the possibility of stepping beyond her comfort zone. The soft glow of her computer screen illuminated her face in the darkness of her bedroom, the only sound the gentle tapping of keys and Fitzgerald's rhythmic breathing from his place at the foot of her bed. Each click brought her closer to a decision that seemed both impulsive and inevitable, a response to the emptiness that had been growing inside her since her parents' departure. Two weeks later, she stood in her living room, suitcase packed, giving final instructions to her neighbor who would care for Fitzgerald and water her plants. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching on the glass of framed photographs and creating tiny rainbows on the walls, as if blessing her departure with splashes of unexpected color. Her heart raced with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation, her breath coming in shorter bursts as she prepared to leave behind everything familiar for the unknown territories ahead. The Lisboa air greeted her with the scent of salt from the nearby Atlantic and the sweet aroma of pastéis de nata from a nearby cafe. Liz wheeled her suitcase over cobblestone streets, the sound of the wheels creating a rhythmic clatter that seemed to welcome her to this new adventure. Each bump a reminder that she had left the smooth, predictable paths of home. The warm breeze carried snippets of conversations in Portuguese, the musical quality of the language surrounding her like a complex symphony she was just beginning to appreciate. Her small rented apartment overlooked a bustling square where local musicians gathered in the evenings, their melodies floating up to her balcony, where she would sit with a glass of local wine, observing life unfolding below. the cool glass against her palm, the rich flavor of the wine on her tongue, the gentle caress of the evening breeze against her skin. All these sensations reminded her that she was fully alive and present in this moment, experiencing the world with an intensity that had been missing from her quiet life back home. At first, she spoke to no one beyond what was necessary for transactions, her natural reserve heightened by the language barrier despite her proficiency in Portuguese. The melodic sounds of the language as it was spoken by natives intimidated her, the rapid pace and unique inflections different from the structured translations she worked with professionally. Her own voice sounded foreign to her ears when she ordered coffee or asked for directions, hesitant and marked by an accent that immediately identified her as an outsider. Then came the rainy afternoon when she sought shelter in a small bookstore, much like she had back home when this journey began. The owner, an elderly woman named Mariana, with silver hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners, invited her to join a weekly book discussion, not taking no for an answer. The gentle persistence in Mariana's voice, combined with the comforting smell of old books and the patter of rain, creating a cocoon of intimacy within the shop, broke through Liz's resistance, and she found herself nodding agreement. The book group became her first real connection in Portugal. 5 locals and 3 expats who gathered to discuss literature in a mixture of Portuguese and English, depending on the book and who was speaking. The warm circle of light from the shop's lamps created a golden pool around their chairs, the soft murmur of thoughtful discussion punctuated by occasional laughter, creating a soundtrack of belonging that Liz hadn't realized she was missing. The rich aroma of the coffee Mariana served, combined with the subtle scent of almond cookies passed around the circle, created a sensory experience that Liz began to associate with friendship. Through Mariana, Liz met Eduardo, a university professor who needed help translating his research papers into English, leading to weekly working sessions at a cafe near the university. The bittersweet taste of espresso became the flavor of their growing friendship, their fingers occasionally brushing as they exchanged documents across the small table, sending unexpected flutters through Liz's chest. The ambient noise of the cafe milk being steamed, cups being placed on saucers, the murmur of academic discussions at neighboring tables became a familiar and comforting background to their meetings. Two months stretched into 4, and Liz found herself with a circle of friends who invited her to dinners, weekend trips to the coast, and cultural events around the city. The sensation of someone squeezing her hand in greeting, the warm embrace of a new friend saying goodbye, the feeling of belonging to a group that noticed when she wasn't present. These physical connections awakened her to the joy of community that had been missing from her solitary existence. Each shared experience, a sunset viewed together, a meal prepared collaboratively, a difficult passage in a book discussed, deeply created bonds that grew stronger with each passing week. When her rental agreement ended, Liz made the spontaneous decision to continue her journey rather than return home or settle in Lisboa, booking a flight to Japan, where she had always wanted to experience the cherry blossom season. The night before her departure, her new friends threw her a goodbye dinner, the table laden with Portuguese dishes she had come to love, the room filled with the sounds of multiple conversations and laughter that wrapped around her like a warm embrace. The bittersweet feeling of departure was tempered by the exchange of email addresses and promises to stay in touch, connections that would travel with her even as she moved on physically. Cherry blossoms floated on the gentle spring breeze in Kyoto, their delicate pink petals creating a sweet-scented snow that dusted Liz's hair as she sat beneath a blooming tree, sketching the ancient temple visible through the branches. The soft rustling of the trees provided a natural meditation soundtrack, the occasional distant bell from the temple marking time in a way that seemed both structured and fluid. Her pencil moved across the paper with newfound confidence, capturing not just the visual beauty before her, but also the sense of serenity that permeated this sacred space. Through a language exchange program she found online, Liz met Akiko, a Japanese woman eager to improve her English, who became her guide to Kyoto's hidden treasures. Their friendship developed through shared cups of matcha in traditional tea houses, the bittersweet taste of the tea and the deliberate movements of the tea ceremony teaching Liz about the Japanese appreciation for mindfulness and being fully present. The smooth ceramic of the tea bowl warming her hands, the vibrant green of the whisked tea, the subtle sweetness that lingered on her tongue. Each element of the experience engaged her senses and anchored her in the moment. Akiko introduced her to a group of international residents, an Australian teaching English, a French chef studying Japanese cuisine, a Canadian researching Shinto practices, who welcomed her into their weekly gatherings at a small izakaya, where they shared dishes and stories late into the evening. The savory aroma of grilled yakitori, the refreshing taste of cold beer, the sound of chopsticks against plates and glasses being refilled. These sensory experiences became the backdrop to deepening friendships and cultural exchanges that enriched Liz's understanding of the world and her place in it. When Akiko's family invited Liz to spend a weekend at their traditional home in the countryside, she experienced the profound peace of sleeping on a futon in a room with paper walls, the first light of dawn filtering through to wake her gently. The subtle scent of tatami mats, the distant sound of wind chimes responding to the morning breeze, the cool, smooth texture of the wooden floor beneath her feet as she rose. These sensations created a peaceful awakening that seemed to mirror her own gradual opening to a more connected way of being in the world. Three months in Japan led to 2 in Thailand, where she volunteered teaching English at a community center in Bangkok, finding purpose in helping others while continuing to expand her own horizons. The spicy fragrance of street food, the humid warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket, the melodic sounds of the Thai language with its distinctive tones. These new sensory experiences added rich layers to her growing understanding of the world's diversity. The grateful smiles of her students became a reward more valuable than any payment, their progress in English mirroring her own growth in cultural understanding and human connection. Through a student's family, she was invited to a traditional Thai wedding, where she danced until dawn, surrounded by strangers who treated her like family, the barriers of language falling away in the universal communications of smile, music, and shared celebration. The colorful silk of her borrowed traditional dress cool against her skin, the sweet, sticky rice desserts melting on her tongue, the hypnotic rhythms of the traditional music moving through her body, all combined to create a night of joy that she would have never experienced in her former solitary life. From Thailand, she traveled to New Zealand, Australia, Peru, and Morocco, spending a few months in each location finding work as a translator or English teacher, making connections that expanded her understanding of both the world and herself. Each new friend brought unique perspectives and experiences into her life. A Maori elder who taught her about connection to the land, an Aboriginal artist who shared stories of the dream time, a Peruvian chef who demonstrated how food could be an expression of cultural heritage, a Moroccan weaver who showed her how patterns could tell stories across generations. Each relationship added a thread to the tapestry of connection she was creating across continents. On a clear night in the Sahara Desert, lying on a sand dune looking up at stars more numerous than she had ever seen, surrounded by friends made during her Moroccan stay, Liz felt a profound sense of belonging not to any one place, but to the world itself. The cool sand beneath her body still holding the day's warmth deeper down, the vast silence broken only by occasional soft words or laughter from her companions, the infinite expanse of stars creating a ceiling more magnificent than any cathedral. This moment crystallized the transformation of her journey from escape to embrace. In each new place, she found herself becoming more open, more willing to initiate conversations with strangers, more comfortable in group settings that would have overwhelmed her before. The nervous flutter in her stomach that once accompanied social interactions had transformed into excited anticipation, her natural reserve evolving into thoughtful participation rather than fearful withdrawal. She collected friendships like she once collected books, each one opening new worlds of understanding and connection, enriching her life in ways she couldn't have imagined when she first left her cottage. 5 years after leaving Connecticut, Liz returned to visit, finding her cottage just as she had left it, thanks to her faithful neighbor, though Fitzgerald had passed peacefully in his sleep the previous winter. The familiar scent of her garden, now slightly overgrown, welcomed her home, the sounds of birds in her maple tree creating a natural homecoming symphony. She ran her hands along the spines of her books, greeting old friends, noticing how much smaller her world had seemed when these stories were her primary connection to places beyond her experience. Her parents visited from Florida, marveling at the confident, joyful woman their daughter had become, listening intently as she shared stories of her global adventures and the friends who now formed her extended family across continents. The familiar scent of her mother's perfume, the sound of her father's distinctive laugh, the comfort of embraces that had known her since birth. These sensory connections to her past blended with her present self, creating a sense of continuity within the tremendous change she had undergone. They sat on her porch watching the sunset, just as they always had, but now their conversations spanned the globe, enriched by experiences that had once seemed impossibly remote. After a month of reconnection with her hometown, Liz sold her cottage, keeping only her most treasured books and paintings, ready to continue her journey with Barcelona as her next destination. As she locked the door one final time, she felt gratitude rather than grief, thankful for the solitary life that had given her a stable foundation and the unexpected disruption that had propelled her into a world full of connections she had never known she was missing. The morning sunlight warmed her face as she turned away from the cottage, highlighting the path before her like a golden invitation to the next chapter of her expansive life. On the flight to Barcelona, Liz reflected on how her definition of home had transformed, no longer a specific place with walls and a roof, but rather a feeling she carried within her, a sense of connection that transcended geography and found roots in relationships rather than physical locations. The gentle hum of the airplane engines created a soothing backdrop to her thoughts, the slight pressure of ascending bringing a physical sensation to match her rising spirits. Through her window, clouds stretched below like a soft white blanket, reminding her that above the temporary weather of daily life, there was always a clear blue expanse of possibility waiting to be explored.